Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ashland Planning Board meeting of Thursday, October 22nd. We have a couple of items on the agenda: public hearing for 20 Ponderosa special permit modification, and public hearing for 300 Eliot Street site plan review, which is they're asking for a continuance, and then a MAPC presentation and discussion of possible downtown zoning changes. So I guess we'll start with the public hearing for 20 Ponderosa. Is that good, Emma?
Yeah, and actually, if I could just announce that the meeting is being recorded by WACA, and if anyone is watching and wishes to join, the meeting ID on Zoom is 838-3417-1559. The passcode is 199137. And if you'd like to join from a phone, you can call 1-646-558-8656. And all of these numbers are available in the calendar event that can be found on the Ashland. Okay, so over to you, Dale.
Okay, so thank you for that. You do that much better than I ever could. So start with the public hearing on 20 Ponderosa special permit. Do we have someone who is going to give us a rundown on what's going on?
Yes.
Yes,
Dale,
good evening.
Sorry, one sec. Do you have the agenda up, Dale?
Yes.
Could you just read the legal ad to open the public hearing?
Which is?
It is kind of the...
Starting after the Zoom thing, or?
You can start it before and then skip saying
public hearing. The Ashland Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, October 22nd, 2020 at 7:15 via Zoom video conference. Then there's the address to hear the petition of T-Mobile Northeast LLC, care of Duval and Klasnick LLC, 210 Broadway, Suite 204, Linfield, Mass. 01940, requesting special permit modification per chapter 282 section 6.4 of the Ashland bylaws. The applicant seeks to modify the existing special permit for the removal of 3 existing antennas and 3 remote radio heads, installing 9 new wireless communication antennas on the existing antenna mount for a total of 12 antennas, with 6 new remote radio units mounted behind the antennas and cabling on an existing 150-foot wireless tower. The antennas will be located at the same center line, height of 147 feet. Project also includes removing 1 equipment cabinet, installing 1 equipment cabinet and 1 battery cabinet on the existing concrete pad within the existing fenced area. The property in question, located at 20 Ponderosa Road, Assessor's Map 13, Lot 35 in the Residential A District. Parties wishing to be heard on this matter should submit comments to the Planning Board ahead of time. Too late for that. Materials may be viewed at Ashland Map on the website. That should do it, right? And so now we have somebody who's joining us. It's not on here who's going to be speaking, so you'll just have to help me out with that.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, go ahead, Daniel.
Yes, good evening. My name is Dan Klasnick. I'm an attorney representing the tower operating the proposal by T-Mobile to modify its existing facility that's installed on the telecommunications tower that is located, as the chair has said, a property where the DPW building is at 20 Ponderosa Road. Just by way of a little bit of background, the tower installation was originally approved in 2002. In 2015, T-Mobile undertook and received a special permit from this board to modify the facility, and it's proposing once again to subsequently modify the facility. The tower also contains the equipment of 2 other wireless service providers, Verizon Wireless and Sprint. So this is a multi-user facility providing service to the town of Ashland. And I guess I would just like to say, I think that by proposing to modify its equipment. What T-Mobile is doing is really adopting an approach that allows it to use existing installations as one way to address service demand on its network. I don't know if this board is familiar with the federal law that's colloquially usually referred to as Section 6409A, an eligible facilities modification request. We have detailed, I think, in our materials that the proposed modification satisfies the standards that have been adopted by the Federal Communications Commission pursuant to their authority to provide regulations related to Section 6409. T-Mobile submitted an application that included the special permit form. We included, I think, a detailed narrative where we not only reference Section 6409, but each one of the articles in your ordinance, certifying compliance with each one. There was a detailed set of plans, FCC licensing. We included a structural report, stamped structural report, and then a stamped radio frequency compliance report. As the chair has already read from the record, this is a pretty minimal item as far as a modification. Just to sort of reiterate, currently T-Mobile has 6 antennas installed on the tower. They're located at 147-foot centerline height. The monopole itself is 150 feet. So they have the top height on the monopole. What they will be doing is removing 3 of their existing antennas and some of the remote radio heads. And then in their place, they're going to install 9 antennas. These will all be mounted on the existing antenna mount, because what's up there now was really designed to accommodate 12 antennas. But back in 2015, their network requirements only warranted them installing 6 antennas. So what they're doing now is, as I said, installing 9 additional, retaining 3. So there'll be a total of 12 antennas. I don't know if everyone has a copy of the plans, but this is called out on sheet C2. It provides you with sort of a bird's eye view as well as an elevation view of the existing mounts with the existing antennas and then the proposed antennas. And then, let me see here. And then on sheet C1 and C1.1 and C1.2, as the chair has already read in the record, they'll be swapping out their equipment cabinet and installing 1 additional battery cabinet. All this will be on the existing concrete pad that's located within the fenced area. Nothing will be located outside the fenced area. There won't really need to be any disturbance within the area because the concrete pad that's already there is of sufficient size to accommodate the equipment change out. Just by way of background, the reason that T-Mobile is doing this, they're working to improve reliability of their voice and data service. This is also part of their 5G installation. So this will benefit businesses, commuters, and I would submit that it's highly advantageous in that they're utilizing an existing facility that's been established for quite a number of years and making a minimal modification to accommodate network requirements and improve service in the town of Ashland. As I said, and as I outlined in our materials, the modification does satisfy the standards of the federal law, Section 6409, in that it is an eligible facility, the tower, and that their modification will not result in a substantial change. And as we noted in our narrative, it meets all the criteria, code, regulations adopted by the Federal Communications Commission. We therefore would respectfully request this board to grant the special permit modification to allow T-Mobile to proceed forward and obtain the necessary building electrical permit to upgrade their facility. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is a public hearing, correct? So first we'll open it to the board members. Any questions from any of the board members or comments? I see Joe's unmuted. He's ready to go.
Thank you, Mr. Klasnick. So is the new equipment going to be 5G in nature, or is it previous 4G technology that the upgrade is going to entail?
It's actually both.
Okay.
One of the antennas on each array is designated for 5G frequencies. The others will be LTE.
Okay, so this is bringing 5G coverage on the T-Mobile network into Ashland on an existing facility.
That's correct.
Okay.
And is this only T-Mobile?
Yes.
There's other antennas, there's other companies, but they're just the old antennas, correct?
I can't speak to whether or not any of the other wireless service providers have upgraded their facility or not at that particular location.
Yeah. Yep. Makes sense.
Does this need to be passed through other boards or committees, such as like the Board of Health or sustainability? Does it have to go through other reviews other than us? This I'm throwing to Dale and Rob, and Trish.
Sure.
Emma, do we need to get other people to weigh in on this, like other boards and committees to weigh on this, other than us?
I mean, Emma, you should answer, but like the board, if the application requires that, like it would require them to go before it, we wouldn't necessarily trigger it to be reviewed by another board. But Emma, is it going before any other boards?
So the wireless communication facility bylaw for Ashland, which is in our zoning bylaw, only brings it in front of the planning board. I cannot speak to whether any other board's regulations or bylaws demands a hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of lean towards Lakshmi too. I wonder if the Board of Health should even kind of look at it to kind of just review it for comments on this.
Right. Is this going to require any like power upgrades for?
Right. Like, I don't know anything about behind the technology, right? What happens behind and what it's going to involve. But
well, I was kind of seeing if Daniel knew they have to upgrade the power, electric service going there or anything like that.
No, as I indicated, there's nothing going to happen outside the existing comp time. We're just going to be swapping out their cabinets and swapping or removing some antennas and installing additional antennas. And as I said, this is subject to the federal regulations, which basically requires approval for this type of modification of the facility. And I know it's Ashland's practice to bring this before the planning board to review. So we've submitted all the materials. My understanding is there are no other boards or bodies that need to look at this. And once we complete the planning board review, my understanding has always been in the past, and we proceed to the building department to obtain the necessary building and electrical permits.
So from my perspective, I mean, I think I was on the board when the previous modifications were made to this tower. From my perspective, I mean, there's existing cell equipment on the tower now, operating now, has been operating for the last decade or more. This is swapping out cellular equipment for new cellular equipment. From my perspective, I'm okay with this. It's at an existing facility. It's not trying to create a new tower in a new location. To me, this is fairly, from my opinion, this is pretty open and shut, and I'm broadly okay with it. I'm be anxious to hear comments from the public.
So I just would go with make sure the board members have all spoken their piece. Anybody else? Because I'm kind of agreeing with Joe, because it's already existing, and that it's when you look at the plans, it's really not going to look that much different, except there's going to be a few more of those little antennas up there. So as far as looks and everything else, it's not going to change much. But
Okay.
anybody else need to comment?
Maybe Emma can confirm. I'm not sure if she knows this, or if you know this, Emma, or if Peter's aware of this, or if it's town council, but it's my understanding, and maybe this is what Mr. Klasnick was trying to describe, is, and I'm not sure about this, but under state regulations for these type of things, that those are already in place and that they're following those and everything they need to do to make this upgrade. And so it almost seems rote, if I'm not mistaken, and merely informative, but that the lease for this property maybe comes up sometime soon in the future, and at that point it can be possibly reviewed more thoroughly if there's other questions that come up, you know, that might involve the Board of Health or other committees. Is that right? Is that correct?
I can speak to the first part, where, you know, the town bylaws, you know, we do have a wireless communication facility bylaw, which is still active, but kind of overshadowed by the federal regulations that push this kind of stuff through. As for a review when the lease for the tower comes up, unfortunately, I'm not informed on what sort of review does or can happen, but Peter should be joining us anytime, so hopefully he can come in and answer that.
Okay. Well, then, does anybody in here that want to speak from the public, general public? And Emma, you got control of that, so if you can let them in whatever.
So if you'd like to speak, if you can just either physically raise your hand or raise your hand through Zoom, that'd be great.
Start with CC Doucette.
Yep.
Unmute. And hi.
So much. I was grateful to be notified that this hearing was taking place tonight. I have not been to a planning board meeting before, so I'm not sure of protocol, but I do have some slides I would like to share with you if I could be granted screen sharing privileges.
It's okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
You should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'm going to put this into presentation mode and wanted to just give you a little bit of background about how I came to know about the wireless radiation issue. That MTPW after my name just means I had the privilege of earning a master's of technical and professional writing from Northeastern University. And back when my kids were in school, we kept hearing about how our kids were going to need to have all this great new technology to succeed in the world. So I was running the Ashland Education Foundation at the time, and we ran many campaigns to get technology into our schools, the wireless infrastructure, the iPads, the Chromebooks, the smart boards. And then one night at book group, a girlfriend of mine who's an electrical engineer tipped us off that there could be something up biologically with wireless transmissions. So that was where my journey began. And then when our schools began to investigate, we actually became the first public school district in the United States to have this little sign hanging in our classrooms that basically says, turn off the wireless when not in use, turn off the devices when not in use, and never ever put an active device on your body, because as we'll see in a moment, the legal fine print tells us that much. So we did this, and our schools are still waiting for higher authorities to really tell them to protect the kids. And then I went and I met with Senator Karen Spilka, and she and I had worked together on the Ed Foundation for years. And when I showed her the peer-reviewed independent science, and I showed her our sign, and then I measured the radiation coming off of her own cell phone and her district director's laptop, this is what they saw. So this is a $400 scientific device. It's a radio frequency detection meter. And here in my home, we have chosen to have hardwired technology, which just means you plug it back in through an Ethernet cable. And when I turn this on, if there's any radio frequency in the area, we will see green, yellow, or red. And here in my home, because we have taken precautionary measures, I get very little activity, and that's just occasional bleed through from my neighbors or from the cell towers that are on this side of town. And as a rule, I keep my cell phone in airplane mode unless I urgently need anything. And watch what happens when I take it out of airplane mode. One second, I don't use it a whole lot. Okay. Oh, you know what? Okay. So this is the audio, and what this allows us to do is see and hear these invisible signals, right? So this is from one cell phone, but this kind of radiation is going to be pulsing all the time from every single one of those antennas that is mounted up on that tower. Right? So when this goes into green, that is where the industry is still investigating what the biological effects are. When it goes into yellow, there are many who are experiencing microwave sickness symptoms already. Some of you may be able to relate even to the lack of ability to sleep properly anymore, headaches that your doctors can't figure out, nosebleeds, and this epidemic proportion that we have of anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation is, we'll see in a moment, this is a neurotoxin. So Senator Spilka put me with a lawyer in her office, and we whittled out a little bill that would simply get the right minds to the table to start investigating this at the state level. And then on this journey, I've had the privilege of connecting with many of the world's leading experts in radio frequency radiation, doctors, scientists, public health experts, and far too many people have become ill from this. So we have built a little nonprofit out of Europe called Wireless Education, where we have a schools and families course, and we have a corporate safety course. So literally anybody could be trained in a half an hour to know what the risks are, what the science is telling us, what other countries are already doing, because who would know that France has a national law that you cannot have wireless around preschools, kindergarten, nursery schools. And here our industry just continues to push all Wi-Fi all the time. And in fact, today I just got notice that the region of Lille, France, just put a moratorium on 5G. There are other areas around the world. Brussels has put a moratorium on 5G. There are cantons in Switzerland, and we'll see what some other things have been happening locally. So when I first discovered this for 2 years, I had nobody I could talk to about this. And then a panel of world experts came to the Massachusetts State House in 2015. And I met a few other people there who knew about it. And then there was actually a standing room only forum held over at the Plymouth Church in Framingham, and people from all over the area came out because they too understood the risks of this. So in the last year, we have formed Massachusetts for Safe Technology, and we just launched a website. So folks are welcome to go out there. You'll see news stories where this is happening all over the state. You'll have events that people are doing for educating their communities, and then the science and what's happening politically. I was so honored to be asked to co-chair the technology panel for the Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference down at the National Institutes of Health. And I brought with me the retired president of Microsoft Canada, Frank Clegg, who has become a whistleblower on this issue. We also brought with us Martin Paul, who's a professor emeritus out of Washington University, who's one of the world's leading scientists on this. And the reason I mention this is anywhere in my presentation where you see an underline, that will back up everything I'm saying. So don't take my word on any of this. Please take the time to do your due diligence. But there were other experts at that panel at the NIH, and those videos are nice. They're all like less than 10 minutes. One of the gaps when I first started investigating in 2012 is that we didn't have a way to train our healthcare providers. And then last September, we had the first US medical conference that offered continuing medical education credits for doctors. And this is going to happen again. We're holding an international conference at the end of January. And in fact, tomorrow there's a pre-conference course held by Dr. Magda Havas out of Canada. She has taught electromagnetics up there at Trent University for decades. And she's going to do 2 days of 3 hours each. And anybody can go sign up and register for this course and start getting the information that the industry keeps us from getting unless we know to go look for it. So when Ashland finally took action with our schools, it was because they went in and read the legal fine print. If anybody tonight has an iPhone with you, I would welcome you to take that out right now. So if you don't have an iPhone, these fine print warnings come with all of our devices down in the legal section. And this website, See the Fine Print, has culled a number of those, so you can go in and look for your own, or just Google your own, put in the make, model, and RF exposure. So from an iPhone, scroll down from settings and just go down a little ways and hit general. On an older phone, you would hit about up at the top, but on a newer phone, you go right from general all the way down to the bottom, and you'll see legal and regulatory. And once you see that and you hit it, up comes the little list at the top, and 5 or 6 down, you'll see RF exposure, which is radio frequency radiation. And in this legal fine print, the industry calls this two-way microwave radiation. They call it energy or radio frequency. And in that legal fine print disclaimer, it tells us a couple of really important things. One, this device was tested X amount of distance from the body. So if you use it in a way that is not within their fine print, you may be exceeding the FCC limits for public radiation exposure by many times. It also suggests that we use a hands-free option, because without telling us forthright, this one device now has 5 or 6 separate antennas that constantly pulse microwave radiation at billions of cycles a second now, to constantly pulse and make a handshake with the nearest cell tower or router. And tonight's message is certainly not no technology. We love our technology and we love what amazing things we're able to do, but it's high time we be given the facts so that we can have a chance to choose safe technology. And as I was investigating this, and if you do a cursory search as Wi-Fi safe, you will see studies that will show no harm. And at the time that I was looking at them, I didn't know that in the scientific community, no harm is never the same thing as safe. Nor did I know that these were by and large industry-funded studies done under conditions that would deliberately show no harm. Then in 2015, Harvard's Law School Center for Ethics came out with this 59-page report called Captured Agency: How the FCC is Dominated by the Industries it Presumably Regulates. And you can go validate that too. Ajit Pai, who's our current FCC chairman, is a former Verizon senior lawyer. His predecessor, Tom Wheeler, used to head up the CTIA, or the Cellular Telephone Industry Association, which has now rebranded itself as the Wireless Association. So I kept thinking somebody's got our backs on this. And when I read Captured Agency, that was my missing piece. They tell us in there that this is basically the wireless industry is using the big tobacco playbook all over again. So that's where I found my voice, and I went, wow, if nobody's really going to be protecting us, I'm going to do everything I can to protect myself and hopefully our community. So the FCC continuously points to other federal agencies that say, oh, the FDA says it's fine. Well, the FDA completed a $30 million study. They asked the US National Toxicology Program to investigate whether radio frequency from cell towers and cell phones could cause any harm. They started that study more than 2 decades ago when cell phones were the technology of the day. And after 20 years, They had an unprecedented peer review down at the National Institutes of Health, where world leading scientists, doctors, and others weighed in. And in their final report, they concluded clear evidence of cancer and DNA damage. Now, clear evidence is a formal classification. It's the highest classification that the world's leading toxics researcher can give. And so our US Senator Ed Markey back in 2012 knew that this study was underway, and he asked our Government Accountability Office to do something about this. And so the Government Accountability Office at the federal level opened up a docket, and the FCC asked people to send information in. Hundreds upon hundreds of statements were sent in, including the American Academy of Pediatrics that said we need to protect our children, the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, which has already issued a public statement for school superintendents to use hardwired technology and not expose our children to wireless. And then all the scientists weighed in. So clear evidence from the world's leading researcher is telling us cancerous tumors and DNA damage, among other findings. Well, the industry spins it every chance they get. And the gentleman who's now heading up the FDA's radiation area is Dr. Jeffrey Shuren. He turned around and told the FCC, man, no need to change your exposure limits. Keep doing what you're doing. Well, one might ask why somebody would do that. Well, Dr. Jeffrey Shuren is married to a woman who is a partner in a law firm that represents the industry to the tune of billions of dollars. And that's on my previous slide. You can go look at that too. So in addition to cancers and DNA damage, the science is very clear that this is damaging our reproductive systems. And I went and pulled up the infertility studies, and they have taken male human sperm, exposed it to a laptop with the antennas turned on, and it changed the DNA, which is the roadmap to grow a proper little human. It slowed the motility of the sperm, and it caused far fewer sperm to be viable in just 4 hours of exposure to that laptop. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. We had just bought a laptop for my youngest daughter to go into high school with. And of course, where is she using it? But right on top of her reproductive organs. So that's what got me really started on this. But the science also indicates that this is a neurotoxin. So the increasing levels we are seeing in our society of ADD and ADHD, of autism, of Alzheimer's coming on at earlier and earlier ages, this is a neurotoxin. It hits the central nervous system especially hard, and it hits the immune system especially hard. And so now what have we done? We have given every child in the Commonwealth a wireless device to access their education with no safe technology information. And children, as the science shows us, are especially vulnerable. They're not just little people. Their DNA is still forming. Their central nervous system is still under construction. Their immune system is under construction. And as this graphic here shows us, children biologically, inch per inch, absorb more radiation than you and I do. When you look at this graphic here, it's tilted sideways, but the little yellow thing is your ear, where you would put a cell phone up to your head. And you see that the radiation goes through an adult skull about 1/3 of the way through. On a 10-year-old child, it goes about 2/3 of the way through. And on a 5-year-old child, it's going completely into that child's brain.
CC, really,
Yeah.
And if I may, tonight's meeting, I didn't realize you were going to give your whole presentation tonight. Pete told me that you wanted to
I
give.
don't need to do the whole thing tonight, but let me go to the cell.
Well, I'm just going to say, because this really, we can't, this is beyond our decision tonight is not on, it's a good, and I'm ready to, start just using my regular phone, but
yeah,
just
I
so,
do.
just so
I
you
use
know
my
that,
landline.
that is very good information, but tonight's hearing is to approve the upgrades on the tower or not. We can't really make them take it down.
Yeah.
So
Well, let me
just
give
so
you
you know,
some-
because, and then we could set up a night when you want to come in, because I talked
Okay.
about it, if you want to come in and give your whole presentation.
Yeah, that would be great, but
We just like to keep it to comments about the actual tower and what's,
okay.
because we're really restricted by the federal government and the state on what we can do or can't make them
Well,
do.
sort of. I can tell you what some other communities are doing, and Ashland is way behind. So cell towers, again, always look to the non-industry funded science. And when we do that, we are being told that there are adverse neurobehavioral symptoms and cancers within 1,640 feet of a cell tower. In Ashland, our bylaws allow a cell tower 300 feet from residences and from schools. So antennasearch.com is a free online service where you can put in any address and it will show you how many cell towers and cell antennas are within the area. I put in the State House address recently. It usually gives you 3 miles. There were so many in Boston, so densely populated with radiation, it could only give me a 1 mile radius return. And there are 1,184 antennas in downtown Boston within a 1 mile radius. So we have got to put some precautionary measures in place. And we talked about 5G or 5th generation tonight. The industry's spinning that. And this is pertinent to our talk tonight because as the industry lawyer has told us, they are not just adding more of the same. What they are putting on that tower, if you approve this, is a whole different type of technology. So if one were to look at the electromagnetic radiation spectrum, what is being used today are longer waves for 3G and 4G. Those longer waves are able to get through buildings and objects very easily, and that's why you can get a signal wirelessly inside your home and office. So 5G will not operate on its own. It still needs all of these macro cell antennas that are already mounted. And the industry is promising us faster entertainment downloads, smart cities, super highways. And if you notice what the industry is migrating their business model to, they're actually buying up the entertainment companies. That's one of their new revenue streams. And for 5G and the Internet of Things, they plan to put a wireless antenna, a radiation emitting antenna, in just about everything you buy, from your appliances to your baby diaper to your potty seat, all of it. They're going to put these antennas in. And the other revenue stream is to harvest your data and sell that to people who want to know what you're using. So it's a huge privacy issue as well. And in order for 5G to fly, they've maxed out their profitability using the longer 3G and 4G waves. All that's left are these crummy little millimeter waves. And that's what they're proposing to put up on that tower on Ponderosa Drive. They're going to put in more 4G and they're going to put in these 5G millimeter waves. Now, these can't go through objects very well. So I've gotten reports out of towns in Maine, they come in overnight and start putting up these antennas at the curb. And because the waves can't go through objects, they start clear cutting the trees in order for those little millimeter waves to be able to go there. So this is a whole different layer of technology that we need to look at very, very carefully. Their goal is to put millions of these small cells all over the United States, and it's happening all over the world, every 2 to 12 houses at the curb in our public access way, right outside your bedroom. That's the only way 5G is going to work, right? So you can, if you start approving these applications, you can look forward to having cell towers inside your neighborhood, not just these poor people on the communities surrounding Ponderosa, but every single neighborhood is their goal. And if you look at this little map on the bottom, that's what's already in Boston. You can see how densely these are being installed on top of those 1,184 macro antennas that already exist. And then, as they've done with every other generation, they promise that they're going to give high-speed access to everybody. And they have never fulfilled their current commitments on 3G and 4G. our rural communities still have very, very poor and limited internet access. So it's their business model to go into the highly densified population areas, sell as much as they can, force the public to upgrade their personal devices while they continue to earn their profitability without delivering on their promises. And by the way, none of this was ever tested for safety. If you go into this link, you will see Senator Richard Blumenthal in a commerce hearing at the federal level. And two of the industry leaders were there, and he said to them, so please help us understand how much funding has been allocated to do independent scientific investigation to make sure this is safe before it comes to market. And both of those industry leaders said they knew of no science that had been done. So we should not just rubber stamp this. There is a ton of information we need to come up with. And now just this month, Computer World put out an article saying 5G is a bad joke. It's not giving us faster speeds. And Computer World's not alone. There are many others who are making these observations as they go out and measure how fast are these antennas, and they're not. So if we approve these, we are serving the industry interest and not Ashland's. And just to give you some encouragement, we are not the only town having this conversation. Shelburne, Massachusetts already has reworked their bylaws, and they have put a 1,500-foot setback in and 3,000 feet from schools to protect the children. We allow this 300 feet from everybody. Centerville is fighting a cell tower down at the Cape in a church steeple. Holliston recently reached out to me because now the industry is trying to just start slapping these small cell antennas right on top of the power lines. There's a lawsuit that's going to court on Monday in Chappaquiddick over a cell tower. Wayland 20 years ago knew enough, and they've got a 900-foot setback. Dover Sherborne successfully fought off cell tower antennas at their high school. Concord just relocated a tower because citizens got informed and spoke up. And so the industry will tell us, oh, this is rubber stampable. It's easy, just do it. Well, it's not, and it's not safe, and it's not right. And then here in Ashland, I went after a grant with gratitude to our Board of Selectmen and our library trustees, and we became the first in the nation to put one of these RF detection meters on loan in our public library. So anybody with a Minuteman card in Ashland can go take this out. And then when I was at that medical conference last September, a doctor from Newton, she and I worked on a cultural council grant together, and we got one of these put in her library too. So what I want to mention though is the city of Boston has already filed a comment with the FCC saying, we do not trust these FCC limits for public radiation exposure. We believe the public, this is hazardous. Important for you to know, the town of Burlington, Verizon came in with 7 small cell applications, and the town of Burlington had more questions than the Verizon lawyer could answer. And so they formed a crosstown committee with members from all of their boards. And you guys might want to think about doing this, but they investigated this. They engaged a lawyer who's very good with telecom law. And they came up with a small cell policy that said anything you put in has to be ADA compliant, Americans with Disabilities Act.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Real quick. This it seems like this is a this is would be more appropriate for putting up a new cell tower. I would like to get a legal opinion because a lot of this is beyond our jurisdiction.
But it's not. If you strengthen those bylaws,
I would like to ask Pete. I think Pete's here. If we can get a legal opinion, because I don't know if we can just deny it because we don't like 5G. Maybe we can, but I would just like to get, because it sounds like this is all good information and I appreciate it, but this is more like all these other towns. We need to make new laws. That's where you should focus that on.
And we have, we're working on that.
Is upgrading this one tower that's already there. So we have to, and I'm just saying, so we have to focus, and there's other people that want to speak too. So we need to focus on this tower that we're upgrading.
Yeah.
And I would like to, because you bring up a lot of good points, but a lot of that may be beyond our jurisdiction. I think Pete's in now. if he could chime in and see if we legally, if we can even deny them from upgrading their tower because of the laws. I'm not sure 100%, but
Legally, they would have to prove to you that there's a gap in service. You do not have to approve those applications.
yes, but I would like to get an opinion from the legal.
Yeah, no, that's
legal,
great.
Because I don't want to, you know, I don't want to just cut you off, but that it sounds like your conversation is great, but it's more for getting a new bylaws and new restrictions and that would be a good thing to try to do.
Yeah,
but
and
right
if we can go back on the agenda for your November meeting, I would love to come in and give the full presentation.
Yeah, we can get like that. Tonight, we're just talking about upgrading this existing tower, so we need to really focus on that, and there's other people that need to come in too and talk, so.
Sure.
All right.
Okay.
So if there's any last things you want to say that has to do with this tower and upgrading this tower. And
I do have a number of questions that Peter might be able to answer. One is, when are all of the current contracts on all of Ashland's towers expiring? We should be looking at that, not just the 20 Ponderosa Drive. Number two, what is the total number of antennas currently co-located on that facility? Number three, are we up against a shot clock? I don't think we are. I think it is up to the town's discretion to either approve or deny this application. Number four, actually, we've already answered that. This will not just be 3G and 4G. This introduces an entirely new technology. So it's not just a rubber stamp of something old. That the industry provides to us measurements of the cumulative exposure that is happening at 20 Ponderosa Drive or Road. They typically will just do a theoretical assurance that it's within the FCC guidelines. But if I were you, I would demand that a real-time measurement be taken and that real-time measurements continuously be taken to make sure that we are staying within even those untested FCC guidelines. So suggest that when we have the larger conversation, we start talking about incorporating other boards on these reviews, like the Board of Health. And so, Peter, if you have some answers to some of those questions, we'd be very grateful.
Hey, how you doing? And also, Pete, you can, you know, that's available. He's available at Town Hall through emails and appointments too, to get a lot of this information that has to do with other cell towers and the amounts of everything. I think we really need to focus on this one tower that's in front of us and the upgrade that they want to get approved. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I look forward to coming back. I know it's a lot to take on if you've never learned about this. It's kind of like drinking water from a fire hose, but it's critically important that we get this right for the town.
Okay, thank you. I see Mark's been waiting for a while, so can we let Mark speak now?
Okay, I'm all set, thank you. And I do have a few questions on this project, but thank you, CC, for coming through again. You and I worked a little bit. I gave you some paperwork earlier, so I kind of understand where you're coming from. Now, one question which was already answered by the Mr. Klexnick about the replacement of the antennas. While we're replacing what's there now, is the lot size going to change after that gets done? I got a few questions. I got a few questions.
Should I answer that, or?
Yes, Daniel.
Yeah, there's no physical change to the size of the fenced area.
All they're doing is adding it. It looks like the antenna, the brackets and everything is the same size. They're just putting more antennas on each side, right?
Yes, and as I said, our T-Mobile rather, will be swapping out some cabinets, but it's on their existing concrete pad that's already within the fenced area.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. If you don't interrupt, I'll get through this in less than 5 minutes. Will the equipment be in underground vaults? It was said on the plans. that there was going to be underground vaults to put in cables and the wirings and stuff like that. Is that true?
And did you know that?
Daniel, Mr.
Do you
President,
want me to answer? I'm
Daniel,
sorry.
yes.
Daniel should answer these questions. These questions are to Daniel.
Yeah, as once again, the cabinets are located on a concrete pad. It's already there.
They're not changing, right?
The concrete pad, no, it's already there.
They're above ground, but they're just putting a new cabinet in that accommodates the new equipment in the same place the old one was.
Exactly.
Okay. Mark?
Okay. And will the radio frequency safety standards be used on these antennas?
Would you like me to answer that?
Yes, please. Go ahead,
Yes.
Daniel.
With our application, Mr. Chairman, through you, we submitted an RF emissions compliance report. We certainly want the community to be comfortable with what we're doing. Although we're not technically required to do this, because as this board is aware, the FCC has exclusive jurisdiction, and pursuant to the Telecommunications Act, local government may not base any of its decision on the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions. This is exclusively within the jurisdiction of the FCC and the standards they've adopted. But in the RF emissions compliance report that we provided, it's a stamped report by an engineer. And it not only looks at T-Mobile, but it looks at all the wireless service providers operating there. And just as it relates to T-Mobile, based upon a 100% scale, the T-Mobile measurements at 6 feet above ground level, which is what the FCC requires, will be 0.645% of that 100% allowable level. The total cumulative level that's stated in the report, this takes into consideration Sprint, Verizon Wireless, and T-Mobile, will be 1.865% of the 100% allowable level. So the report certifies that the facility, as modified, will not only be fully compliant, it will be so far beyond compliance that it's barely measurable. We did provide that report with, and it's a stamp report in evidence, and it's specific to this particular location. I hope that's helpful.
Okay. And Cece, can you wait until I get done to that? I'll be all set about less than 5 minutes from now. I saw you'd put down some notes, and I want you to answer some of those. Is the Compliance Act of 1996 is going to be used in this?
I'm sorry, in what context?
The compliance of 1996 that got passed for these antenna and frequency controls.
As I said, the report that we provided with the application certifies compliance with the standards that were adopted by the FCC. I gave the percentage ratings, and as I said, the report certifies compliance to the board.
And leaving out in a detail where answering, how did you learn and how did you pass the radio frequency emissions compliance report? Not give full detail, but how well did they actually, and you and them understood each other?
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I don't understand the question.
The radio frequency compliance report that says that T-Mobile was in compliance.
I'm sorry, what's the
Now
question?
that's in your project and the paperwork with the subject we're talking about. It had an 18-page report of compliance with the radio frequency emissions.
Yeah, that's what I was just referencing to when I had answered the previous question in regards to the measurements that were provided. I had provided the threshold at 100% and provided, and I'm reading from the report, that the T-Mobile install will be 0.645% of the 100% allowable level, and that the total cumulative amount, taking into consider Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon Wireless, will only be 1.865% of that 100% allowable level. So the report that you're referencing certifies compliance with the FCC standards. I hope that's helpful.
Okay. And the last two is for the board itself. I saw on the town application form, which has this on it, and it says this zone district. Why is it zone district residential A? That's the question to the board or anybody.
The point when they
Okay.
go ahead, Pete.
Mark, that's just the zone that this area is in. I can't explain why is it zoned residential A. I think over the number of years in Ashland zoning, that's what it has been, I would say. You know, we're not looking at, I don't know the last time that this area has been rezoned. And this area was reclassified, I would say, Mark. But I can take a look at that for studies. But yes, the entire parcel down there at 20 Ponderosa, which would include the DPW headquarters, is always is zoned residential, I could say. That would include the ball field, the Fish and Game Club, that entire section of town on the northern side of the river.
And to go with that, I saw in that same line, I think it was across near the middle, why is each unit, what does the $250 per unit, what's that used for? It says that price $250 per unit, residential unit. It's on the application. And I thank Emma for letting me, having her find that for me.
Can you point to where it is on the application, Mark?
Near the bottom, the town website page, and the applicant's name and the address of where this is at, and it's halfway down.
I can take a look at that later, Mark. I don't have the paperwork in front of me, and I can get you an answer.
Love you. Good night, buddy.
Okay, and last thing is, as Pete and everybody knows me by now, I'm a bylaw freak, and what I got here is all the 3 amendments that was amended on November 19, 2013 on wireless communications facilities and tower from 2013. So I still have that, and that's where me and Cece worked on and got the paperwork going together. And I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna not be for or against. I'm not gonna give a definite thinking about it, but I'm gonna let Cece be my mentor on this. I'm gonna let the board and the town be the best judgment of what they do. Thank you.
All right.
Can I just ask one quick question regarding the measurements that were calculated? Mr. Klasnick, was that a theoretical calculation or were those calculated in the field?
Well, this is based upon what T-Mobile will be installing. So by its very nature, it has to be theoretical.
Okay, because we need to know that the theoretical doesn't always come out to be the same in the environment, because these radio frequency signals, they react differently when they are in the environment and there are other objects in the area. So we should think about that and perhaps require that we have mandatory testing in the field.
If I could, just to clarify, the report assumes the worst case scenario, that all the antennas are operating at 100% of their capacity and all the time, and other theoretical aspects that actually increase the rates. So the rate that there is the worst possible case scenario, which
unless they hit something and bounce back, and then you wind up getting double the exposure, for example. So it is still very much worthwhile to do real-time measurements and not just go off of calculations.
Okay, so Florence has been waiting patiently, so you can unmute, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm an abutter, and I'm very concerned. There are two things that I'm very concerned about. One is for my grandchildren who live on Sudbury Road. And after what I've heard from Cece and what I have read about, I have no assurances that they're going to be any safer than they have been, or as safe as we add more wireless radiation to very close to them. Those of us who are parents or grandparents would be very concerned if your kids were close enough to be seriously affected by this. That's one question I have. And for the Board of Health and for other people not to be included in this amazes me that it could just quietly happen. And so that bothers me a lot. The second thing that concerns me is that our property values are most likely going to decrease if word gets out about this. If people know, then there's a very good chance that the value of the little house we have on Sudbury Road will go down, as all the houses along Pleasant Avenue and Sudbury Road, maybe Bresnik also, might be affected. And some of them are big, beautiful houses that people have put a lot of investment into. So that's another big concern. And I'd really appreciate, Pete, if you would do Cece the justice of giving her the answers that she's asked for to all the questions that she's asked. I'd appreciate if you do that. But I want you to know that this is very, very upsetting to me as a grandparent.
Thank you, Florence. I can work. I have a couple answers to Susie's question regarding this tower itself. I know this tower dates back to 2002, and it was to T-Mobile, and I do have the original agreements as part of the contract and the agreement for the cell tower indoor lease. I would say there were 3 5-year extensions after the initial 7 years. I believe, and the term of the lease agreement runs out in 2022, to my estimation. Not having the agreement in front of me, but that's what I do know. There are 3 providers on this tower, Florence, and I believe Mr. Dan, the attorney, has confirmed that. And regarding any other town-owned towers and the lease agreements, I'm happy to provide those to whatever citizens are interested in those documents. Obviously, I would ask all the citizens to go through the proper procedures requiring document, the Massachusetts document request forms through the town clerk, and go from there. But, but Florence, we're not trying to hide anything. This is why we are going through this process. This is why the planning board is having a hearing tonight. And I look forward to trying to pull together all answers to Cece and to you, and having a conversations with Cece over the 17 months I've been to the town of Ashland. I think Cece is going to appear on an upcoming planning board meeting to talk about these issues. And I believe, and I don't want to speak for Cece, but I believe Cece has presented in front of the Board of Health too. And so this has been spoken about in the town to the Board of Health. And so I will say that this is these conversations have taken place, I would say, for us.
And Pete, just really quick, when the lease is up, is that renegotiated with who? How does that work? Does that have to be approved again, or is that go?
No, I assume that is renegotiated with the select board.
So they have to approve it in 2022. They'll have to approve the redoing the lease.
I assume, Dale. I'm not an attorney. I've never dealt with this. Typically, I would not be in the room at that point of the conversation. So don't hold my word to it. I'm happy to find out and get, go through counsel and find the procedure. But I'm assuming making assumptions.
Okay, it might be good information because of these people want to find out about it. Want to find out about doing something about it. Should find out what the procedure is so they can talk to you know, voice their opinion to whoever needs to be, you know, to renew the lease or whatever on that. So tonight, what we're doing here tonight is approving the equipment, but we can consider all this, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, this is, it's not, it does the, I don't know, maybe someone can tell me legally, does the FCC or the state override us, or the federal government require us? You know, are we going to get, if we say, no, we don't want the radiation, or is there going to be legal action?
I couldn't confirm that, Dale. I don't know.
These are things we might need to get some answers to.
Yeah, and Dale, if because of the conversation that's taken place over the last hour and 15 minutes, if you think it's appropriate to have council weigh in and just for the board to understand what they can look at and what we shouldn't look at, I'm happy to set up Lisa Mead with town council, Lisa Mead, to attend the planning board meeting or the next planning board meeting if the board would like to continue this case. So Lisa can, provide a legal opinion to you beforehand, but also if she's available to appear and help the board come to a legal decision that is grounded in.
We don't want to overstep
the board's ability to say yes or no.
And the rest of the board agree with that would be a good idea. You can nod. You don't have to unmute. I think that would be a good idea, because it's kind of a little bit foggy on what, if we're the approval board and there's no health board or anything, maybe we're considering that. I just like to find out where we stand.
Okay. So yeah, I think tonight, I think we can, if you would like, Dale, we do have the ability to continue this matter, and obviously with COVID, we can continue it on, and we can move forward in the coming days. I'll reach out to Lisa Mead to see to brief her on the matter. She knows about this matter. I've already spoken to her about it once, and I can see if she can, put together a legal opinion and maybe attend the meeting if possible.
Is the rest of the board agreeable with that? Any other comments from the board?
I may just offer something.
And then go ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to suggest, that there's two issues at hand here. There's the immediate issue of the upgrades to the cell tower, which we may or may not have any jurisdiction over. Mm-hmm. And so that's one issue. We can't make a decision about something that really we don't have the power to make the decision over. And the other issue is the larger question about 5G or about cellular in general. And that's a much larger discussion. Obviously CC has done a lot of research, but also a simple Google search will show you the other point of view. And so it's important, I think, that in any discussion about this, it's really a balanced discussion that we hear for any community, and any kind of argument, that you really hear both sides of the science, where both perspectives are coming from, and in order to make a decision that's best for a community as a whole.
Thank you. Okay, then if we continue this, what would be a date?
Dan, did you have anything to say as the applicant?
Yes, thank you very much. Certainly appreciate that the board feels that it needs more time to consider this matter. Certainly welcome the opportunity for town council to provide further guidance in this matter. I'm available to work with council as well to the extent that would be helpful. I do feel it's my obligation to note that there is a time period that's specified by the FCC for boards to complete reviews of these applications and approve, or basically they're deemed granted. And that's not something I think any of us want to have happen. I guess I would just want to understand the time frame for the next meeting. And then I think we would have to calculate the 60-day period and if necessary, agree to extend that period to avoid, I think what the board is just trying to do is take a deliberative approach here, consider all the issues and have no concerns about that other than the delay that's going to result, which is exactly what 6409 is intended to prevent. And I'll let town council provide you with the guidance and outline on that particular issue, because I think it's fairly clear cut as to the authority of the board in these matters. So I believe we filed the application in September. And when would the meeting be?
Excuse me, Dan. So the next planning board meeting is going to be scheduled for November 12th, which is the Thursday. The planning board is only going to meet once in November due to the holiday, Thanksgiving. This application was filed on September 29th, date of the town clerk. And looking at the 60 days, opening the hearing back up and continuing the matter until November 12th would tell me that only 44 days has elapsed since the date of the filing of the original application. So therefore, we would still be in that 60 days. So I feel comfortable as, the planner, giving a 2-week extension, having legal counsel weigh in, would still be under that 60-day time frame at that point. If we did anything beyond that point, Dan is correct, we would have to come to a continuance, an agreement, I would say, between the applicant and the board to extend that period out.
Yeah, and I believe if we get legal input, for me anyway, I believe we could make a decision.
Okay.
So yeah, so that would be on the next meeting?
November 12th?
November 12th, and if Dale, if you could just make a motion.
I will.
On that, we can continue that.
Okay, until November 12th. Okay, is there a motion to continue this hearing until November 12th?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, roll call, please.
Trisha Kendall, aye.
Lakshmi Krishnan, aye.
Deepa Venkat, aye.
Joe Rubertone, aye.
Dale Buchanan, aye. That passes 5-0-0. And we'll have an exact time for that, right?
Yeah, at this point, I think that would be at 7:15. It'll be I will put it at the first item on the agenda if town councils will be present.
Okay, and that'll be listed, announced and all that. So, okay.
We'll post it. Okay.
I just wanted to thank everyone for their time this evening. Appreciate everything, and I look forward to seeing you on the 12th. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ditto. Thanks to everybody. And I had a lovely conversation with Dan this morning, and I also had a conversation with Pete today. So this is not an us against them, any kind of proposition. This is let's get the facts and see what choices we have to keep our town safe and to have excellent technology. So thank you very much for your time. And Dale, if you could reach out to me or Pete later and confirm whether I will be given time to do a full presentation during that meeting, I'd be very grateful.
Thank you. We'll figure it out.
Well, Cece, I'll reach out next week at some point, and I'll coordinate that. I do want to say that I don't know it would be appropriate to have you on giving your presentation the same night as this hearing is back. It has been continued to November 12th.
Okay.
So I may ask to push your presentation to a further date, say in December, just so there's no, just so everyone's clear about the facts and there's no crossover between the two.
Yeah, I just want to add, if I may, that we got a law passed in New Hampshire in 7 months' time. I've had a bill in the Massachusetts legislature for 6 years, but we got a bill passed into law in 7 months to investigate the health and environmental impacts of wireless. They've spent the last year in their commission doing that, and that report is coming out November 1st. So we think that may have great impact on what happens with technology. And so it would behoove us to delay as much as we can putting any more wireless infrastructure into our communities, because the wheels are sort of coming off the bus for the wireless industry.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thanks for your time. Have a lovely evening.
So the next item would be continuous. We're going to continue the public hearing for 300 Eliot Street, correct?
Yes, we're going to continue that until November 12th again.
So they aren't ready with their, and if they already applied for a permit?
No.
Okay, so we don't have to continue or extend anything. We just have to continue the hearing. This is just a discussion.
Yep, this is just the, to accept the, they actually requested a continuance.
Okay.
And so they, at the last meeting, they reached out and they were working with a lighting specialist concerning to really kind of analyze some of the concerns that were brought up at the last meeting. I don't believe I think they're still going back and forth working with the lighting consultant. They haven't submitted any new material. And so at that point, having a conversation with the applicant, I advised him the best thing to do would be to request a continuance from this board until November 12th. And then we can take up that matter at a later date.
Okay, so we're going to continue this till November 12th?
Yes, please.
Okay, and is there a motion to continue the public hearing on 300 Eliot Street until November 12th?
So moved.
I second that.
All in favor, roll call, please.
Trisha Kendall, aye.
Lakshmi Krishnan, aye.
Deepa Venkat, aye.
MAPC presentation and discussion of possible downtown zoning changes. And who is Mr. Kershaw?
Yep. Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen if I can. Looks like I can. It's nice to be back with you all again. So thanks for having me to continue this discussion as we work on the downifications. So last time we spoke about sort of the concepts that we had come up with based upon the results of the survey. So now tonight we're planning on presenting on the actual proposed zoning that essentially implements those concepts that we discussed last time. And then in the future, the next meeting that I come back to will obviously continue to sort of refine this. And then we have a couple other topics related to the sub-district A, whether that should become base zoning instead of an overlay district, as well as whether we should be expanding the borders of the downtown, but that would be to come. So I don't know if you all have had a chance to review the draft, but I'll just walk through it first. And last time it seemed to work best that I would run through the entire presentation and then we'd come back. So that's what I'll plan on doing, but unless I hear otherwise from you. So there was kind of, in terms of the big picture changes, I made some updates to the dimensional standards tables. Essentially, what I was doing was consolidating them into a single table and focusing on the actual sort of hard and fast dimensional standards. And the form-based code elements, they're still in this section, but they're just moved down to another part of the bylaw that I'll explain as we go on, with the thought being that's because because A is focused on the design, so that's this way all the design is put together, and it kind of flows from within the design, the aspects that are sort of kind of principles and encouraged more to the things that are required. And then after that table, there is some language related to standards as the building should be oriented and what can occur in the front yard. And then you have an existing section called additional standards, which mostly are things related to, for example, the fact that there need to be sidewalks, where driveways should be located. So I'm proposing that we rename that from additional standards to lot design standards. and then adding a new subsection that would follow it immediately. So it would be 8.5.12, and that would be called building design standards. And this is where we would contain the various concepts we discussed last week and the other things that are already in your zoning bylaw. So this is the proposed new table. So it's essentially all the same information that is there today. Like I said, it consolidates the dimensional standards. The main change was a change of the front yard setbacks that today in some of the sub-districts are 0. But based upon what we discussed last time, having sort of a minimum setback that sets the building back a little bit felt like it might be more appropriate, and I'll explain that more in a second. The other change that I made, and Pete and I had discussed this, seems to be a little bit of a conflict in your district today, where the tables say, where I have it highlighted red boxes, the tables say 4 stories is your height max, but then when you look at the language that follows it, it actually says it's 3 stories, but 4 with a special permit. So I think the intent is for it to be 3 stories, but then allow for 4 through a special permit. So this, I think, is just clarifying what is the intent. And Pete had sent me this. This is 21 Main Street. This is just as a reminder, is sort of where we even got this idea to test this idea of should there be a front setback. And what it is here, it ranges, I think, from like 9 to 12 feet or so, the front setback. And so that's where we got this range to. That was essentially what we are proposing, from 8 to 15. So it's similar, but just gives a little bit more flexibility.
Okay. Quick question about the chart that you just showed.
Yes.
The other setbacks, the 0 side yard and 12-foot rear.
Yeah.
Are those typical, like a 0 side yard minimum setback from the property line?
Yeah, it's in downtowns, I do see that, because it just means that you could have the adjacent properties touching. Sometimes what I've seen done is if they're abutting, if they're actually kind of have the shared wall is 0. If they're not, then it would be 10 feet. So I have seen it that way, that you can add that if they're not touching, then you have to have some certain distance, like 10 feet.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering about. And I wonder whose purview that comes in then. Yeah, with that minimum side, with a minimum side yard of 0, if someone, I'm just wondering where is that regulated? Is that, what is by right and what is not by right with those kind of setbacks? Also, I'm wondering, is there any, does this accommodate, and maybe this is totally the wrong place, where commercial properties are up against residential properties, and then what those setbacks are? Or is this just within the downtown where there are no single family residential, say,
This, if I'm only familiar with your downtown zoning, this is what's in your downtown zoning. I don't know if you could have it in another zone. And for a building that might, if there are buildings that abut a residential district, this is what this, as of today, this is what it is. So they could technically build right up to the side property line. Yeah.
So Peter, is that, and maybe that's not a part of what we're doing here today. I'm just wondering if, do buildings by right, does the developer by right can go up to 0 feet from the side yard, or is that something we get to talk about given what's on that particular site and what is next door to that particular site? I'm just not sure what this encompasses. Do you understand my question?
I think according to the bylaw, this is by right. This is 0 feet by right. This is not, these aren't special permit as far as projects, according to most of the uses. So, what I can do for the next time, I can give a sample language that shows 0 feet when it's, actually touches another building versus what it would be if they're not sharing a party wall. I can show that next time as an example if you prefer to refine it that way.
Yeah, you know, and also like I'm wondering about that rear yard setback, even in the downtown area, because I believe, and I'd have to go back and look at the map of Ashland, but I believe like there's commercial properties that the rear yard would back up to a residential property, a single family residential property even. And so would that mean that you can put a large commercial property and 12 feet later, you're at the backyard, someone's backyard of a single family residence, where their setback for a residence is probably much larger. So I'm just wondering about when these two zones bump up against each other, and because it actually has come up recently in development questions, and that's a issue I'm concerned about, like, you know, about these other setbacks as well, not just about the street and how we pay attention to them, and how people kind of how developers or builders or, you know, just building owners play nice with their neighbors, I guess.
So one way to solve that, if that's a concern, would be in your bylaw today, after this table, there's a bunch of sort of, they're not technically footnotes, but they act that way. And so we could say something that if abutting a residential district, then that has a different side yard and rear yard, that might be greater if it's touching that. So we can, I'm happy to, again, pose something for the next meeting when I kind of do a little research in terms of what might be most appropriate.
Okay. I would like that. That would.
Sure.
Yeah, I would concur. I would just speak in here real quick. No, Trish, I would concur. What I would typically see in a bylaw is that there would be a second, kind of like an amendment, right? If this property touched, if a mixed use property or commercial property touched a residential property, these setbacks therefore kick in. I think within a downtown district, I think, you know, what Chris was talking about, sharing a party wall, I think, yes, the zero setbacks that's what it's kind of meant to speak to.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's
what if
very
there's not a party wall, you know?
But if there's not a party wall, exactly. So maybe it makes sense to put in, you know, to really kind of reanalyze, you know, what we're talking about here, and dig a little bit deeper and to put those regulations in. So.
Yeah. Thanks. So then this, I won't obviously read all this language, but this is language that would follow this table. And really in terms of the front yards, what it's essentially saying, which came through pretty loud and clear from the survey, was that, yes, we want to have the building set back a little bit, but what you do within that space is really important. And mostly what people want is for it to be associated with outdoor seating for, you know, whether it's for an eatery, if that's what there is there, or some other sort of publicly available open space, or something else that with, you know, again, there's the discretion that the planning board can approve other uses. And also one of the other things that we discussed last time was, you know, allowing the planning board to have the discretion to, if there's some good reason, to have a greater setback than 15 feet for a certain property. There could be reasons for that. And so this kind of clarifies those aspects, and the fact that the parking should not be used in the front yard. That's not what the space is intended for. And that leads to a very kind of walkable, vibrant area that we're trying to create here. And then, so as I mentioned before, so we would rename a section from additional standards to lot design standards, and then we'd have building design standards immediately after that. And so this is where right now what your bylaw basically states is that new buildings should be compatible with downtown Ashland. So this is where, you know, we had a lot of discussion last time, and I don't think we really had consensus with the existing building diagrams. You know, should we keep them? Should we just take them out altogether? You know, I think there was different views within the planning board. And I think there's, you know, there are clearly some issues with what there is today. So my, I guess, proposal as sort of the middle ground would be to keep in the buildings, but to put them here. If you take them out of the table and you really emphasize that, I added some language here that these are examples of the types of buildings that might be appropriate, without making it sound like you have to build one of these buildings. I think it might better get the point across that was the sort of the intent of the bylaw. And then I had, so rather than having per sub-district, I just have a I guess there's 6 of them here, just to kind of, again, illustrate examples of the types of architecture that would potentially make sense within the downtown. And again, emphasizing that these are sort of guides for development. And it gets rid of some of the buildings that were there previously that I think were probably not as helpful. There was one that basically, I think, was the library, which obviously a developer is not going to build. There were some fairly urban looking kind of flat roof townhome types buildings. So I kind of removed those and replaced that with a couple other buildings. I think personally that this way would work well to kind of move forward. And again, this is kind of illustrating the principles, and then following this, then we get into the various design standards that we spoke about last time. So then again, this is just providing the sample language, and also the board had said, you know, one of the fears would be if we put diagrams in, we don't want people to copy this building exactly. And so the idea was that you're essentially just using almost like a box of a building, and then just using, just highlighting ways just to show what the various concept is. So in this case, the concept was to have about 60% measured between 2 and 12 feet of the ground floor on the front-facing building, for 60% for commercial buildings, if it's a commercial use, have glazing. And so this just sort of illustrates what the language says. Another one, there's already a statement that's in your bylaw that's I highlighted in blue about articulating the buildings to achieve human scale and interest, which is great, but that's a little bit more of almost like a design guideline as opposed to something that generally you'd see in a design in an actual bylaw, because that's open more to interpretation. So then I added language that has to do with, and what are some of the examples for this menu of how we can articulate buildings through changing the patterns, vertical elements like pilasters, setting back a part of the building, so there's a different change in the plane. And so again, this illustrates, the diagram attempts to illustrate the language.
The only thing I might change on these diagrams is that if we're not allowing a flat roof, I'm not sure we should be showing a flat roof in the diagrams.
Yes, you know what? It technically is a pitched roof, but I think the angle makes it look not, so I can make a steeper pitch to give off that sense. Thank you for that. I will do that.
Yeah, or just you know, or you're just showing a section of building without a roof, like the other one was just flat on elevation, which maybe doesn't work for this this example. So it didn't really matter what the roof was because you were just trying to show the bottom 12 feet. But you understand what I'm saying, so. Yeah.
Okay. I'll play around with that because to make it clearer and see what works better. For that. And then we talked about the different roof styles. And so again, there's a number of roofs that you find within the downtown today that are sort of compatible with the downtown. And so this language just clarifies that, and also says, though, you can have a different roof with the discretion of the planning board. You know, there conceivably could be a very well-designed flat roofed building that makes sense for downtown Ashland. So if that is the case, this doesn't preclude it, but you have another hurdle to jump through because now you have to sort of prove to you that will be beneficial. And then the final piece were the design, the components that we had talked about that break down the mass. So there were, things like dormers, shed dormers, bay windows, and cross gables. And again, I tried to sort of emphasize here that the actual window treatments, the roof lines, the proportions of all these are, can completely vary and should vary depending on the context of the building, but these are just really just to show what, examples of what that is. We could even just take, for this one in particular, we could even just take out this diagram if it feels like it's not helpful, because I think most people will know what a dormer is, but I figured it's easier to take it out than put it in after. So
I think we might, something like that, we're going to be careful, you're right, we want to be careful about the examples, because like the shed dormer isn't what I look at as a shed dormer. For instance, for that example, like I wouldn't term that a shed dormer.
Okay.
Usually it's
more like what they took off of 128.
Yeah.
Where it
would be a common term.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm not sure.
Technically.
Yeah, I'm not sure we will need the page anyway, but it is good to have it in there for now, maybe.
Okay.
I'm thinking these drawings, it's a lot better and a lot clearer so far what you're doing. It's clarifying a lot of, you're definitely in the right direction.
Okay. So it sounds like the shed dormer in particular, I can put a new diagram that maybe, if you said there was an example of one that you're thinking of in town that might.
Well, the dormer and the shed dormer are really both gable dormers, except one is hipped.
Yeah.
So a shed dormer would have its roof in the other direction.
Just coming straight down from the ridge down to those windows.
Yeah, it wouldn't have a peak on it.
Okay. You know, I defer to you. I've seen it in other diagrams. It's similar to this, but I understand your point. So I'll change that to match that. And so that was really, in terms of the design, there was a couple other minor things. It says right now, for example, that there's in your general regulations that the planning board is going to develop some guidelines, design guidelines, but obviously you have those exist now. So I think we should just update the language just to refer to that. And then there was another area that I thought it would make sense where there are some design principles and that have a lot to do with walkability. But I thought we should also just add here also that in terms of design principles, we're also talking about kind of context sensitive buildings. So those are the changes. You know, I'm happy to, you know, I appreciate all the comments so far, and I'm happy to take other comments and thoughts as we kind of continue to refine this.
Well, I think, like I said, I think it's going in the right direction. This is much clearer than the original to me. And again, just emphasize that we don't want to. And it's good that you're showing little sections of buildings rather than, you know, whole buildings with the door, you know, like a whole building. I'm just afraid that a lot of people will just look at that building and try to copy that and paste it on their plan. We don't, you know, so I know it's hard to do because you want to show examples, but we just want to make sure that we come across letting them know that these are, you know, sample ideas, and then they need to come up with their own. You know, I mean, and some people do, you know, some of them do have good ideas, but some of them are just trying to fit it into one of those pictures. But I think it's very much an improvement. The work you're doing is definitely going in the right direction.
I think the note you added, Chris, about you know, that these are diagrams, you know, intended for inspiration, that exactly is the point, what we want people to read. Like, you know, they're not meant to be copied exactly. They're meant for you to look at and learn from, and then find your own design.
And even if you put on there, even if you put on there, like with, you know, shed dormer or gable dormer, maybe if it said example of, so they keep getting it in their head that this is an example of.
Okay.
A bay window, example of cross gable.
Sure. Okay.
They're minor details, but every little bit. Anybody else on the board have comments about this? Okay, anyone? Public, we'll just take a quick comment. This is, oh, wait, Joseph.
Deepa, did you do you have something? I saw you go off mute.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
Chris, I was just going to ask Chris if there's any feedback he would like to receive from us that maybe we're not focusing on or something.
No, your feedback has been exactly what I've been hoping to get, okay. Which is, I actually was reflecting today, to be honest, just a quick aside, how I had a planning board meeting a couple nights ago in another town, and the planning board, a similar project, and the planning board was almost mute, and it's really hard to get feedback and understand how we can refine it. So no, this is very helpful to hear that, because we are, as you know, this isn't a theoretical exercise. This is for you to actually amend your zoning. So if there are issues, we want to get this right.
So you didn't mind all my interruptions?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, come here.
Sorry, Joe.
Come here and we won't shut up.
Yeah. So
good. Joe?
Yeah, so I also, Chris, I like where you're headed with this, and I think it makes a lot of sense in seeing those elements and those concepts become kind of the standard or the benchmark for what we're looking for. To me is exciting in the right way. You know, and I'm not sure, so clarify if I'm off base here, but part of this exercise, beyond just defining these pieces and clarifying the zoning, is actually looking at the zones themselves and trying to consolidate and clarify some of the zones for what downtown is, right, Chris?
Yeah, we looked into whether A and B and C, like whether we should actually consolidate any of them. They did seem different enough that I'm not sure if we should, or if you should keep them. I thought one area that we had talked about that would be helpful potentially was if A right now is an overlay district, so you could reduce some of the complexity just by having that as base zoning. I'm certainly open to your thoughts on whether we should be combining. It could be helpful if I went up to to this, because this shows me.
So where I'm actually going is what I'd really like to do the next time we do this is start by looking at the map, right? And having a conversation saying, okay, this is what we're calling downtown, right? Here's the map. Here are the different zones. And again, like I myself need to, I want to review what each of those zones are and what the definitions of those zones like entail. And I think that's kind of the critical thing for us as, again, I'm speaking for myself, but like for me to ground myself on when we're talking about something like this, because that's the context for which we have to think through this table. I mean, this is a very, this is like the highest degree of difficulty for a planning board, is like trying to kind of correlate this table with uses and setbacks to actual physical. This is a very specified and kind of focused exercise. And so to me, I'd like to start with the map, look at the zones, and then like have that guide the conversation around some of these pieces. Because yeah, I don't know, that's how I'd like to do it. I don't know if other people disagree with that approach, or it certainly doesn't have to be my way, but it's an ask from my end.
And for me, it is, I think there might be some room in here to, like we were talking about, if it's up against, the rear yards up against residential, maybe rather than setting specific, maybe it just has to be, the distance has to be approved by the planning board if it abuts a residential, so that each project can be decided on how it affects everything. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like with the 3 stories, we have 3 stories, and then with the approval, we can go 4 if there's circumstances where that works. Maybe on some of these things, like the setbacks on the rear and the side, rather than just allowing them to go 12 feet, or have, maybe if it abuts a residential or certain circumstances, that distance has to be approved by the, whatever that distance is. Because you might look at one and it's like, well, the way it's set up, 12 feet's fine, but another one, it might be like, you need more space. So a little bit more of planning board approval on certain circumstances where they can do things, but it just has to come before the board so we can look at the whole project and see how it affects all the surrounding. So and maybe some, not everything, but there may be some things in there that might work. You understand what I'm?
Yes. So maybe then, just to take between the last 2 comments, then what might make sense for when I come back the next time, I got some feedback for some things to refine here, that I have a kind of a clear direction, but it sounds like it would be helpful now to kind of, which we are already sort of, the next step was to transition to looking at the districts themselves a little bit. So, we can start with that map, and we can look at, are these boundaries right? Maybe based upon this map, do we really need 3 sub-districts, or, really the main difference between these is the frontage and the minimum lot size. So we can kind of see, does that still make sense, or does there need to be some nuance that, keep the 3 sub-districts, but maybe there are certain provisions only applicable to sub-area C, for example. So I think that all makes sense to do for the next time, and I'm happy to prepare that for whenever you'd like for me to come back.
Chris, I have a question. Are these zoning bylaw suggestions only limited to the building structure and the lot? Or do we need to provide feedback as to what else goes on the lot? Say, I'm thinking landscape, trees, and if you have a side yard, should we recommend like having trees put between the, to divide the buildings? Or can we give feedback in those lines too? Or is it only limited to the building structure and the lot?
No, I mean, it is appropriate to provide, especially in these sort of more form-based code districts, to provide standards as it relates to the open space elements. There is some in there today that already exists. I don't recall exactly at the top of my head what it says, but I'm happy to incorporate any feedback you have in terms of what you would like to see on that, and also, again, in advance of the next meeting, I can bring up the language of what is there today, and we can see if that feels sufficient to you, or if we need more standards to be within this bylaw.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anybody else on the board? Anyone from the public make a quick comment? Okay, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Mark Cassoni. And what's your first name, Mr. Kushner? What's your first name?
Chris.
Chris, I thank you for bringing up the form base and the tables to what they should be now. You did a lot of arithmetic work with the frontage and lot sizes, because not all is a square cookie cut lot to use, right?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be frank, I'm using, these are all what you have there today, other than the front yards. You've already done this work. I'm just repackaging it.
So you are using the tables, but you're bringing it to what you understand and to set forth to the board itself.
I reorganized the tables. The only change to the actual things that I have made, like I said, are the front yard setbacks. Everything else is exactly what you have today. It was just in a different format that I discussed at the beginning.
And I'm happy that you did this. I'm glad it's got to be with the planning board and not other committees, but the planning board's got to be the main step starter to get these involved with the developer themselves. So I'm looking at downtown and the map, as Joe was saying, the map shows, but it doesn't show actual ground lot itself when you get there. So what could change in the future for the map may not be there when it happens. But this consolidated dimensional, and when you put the 6 buildings as examples up there, is what I was shooting at the time, about 5 or 6 years ago when I got this passed in the town meeting, was looking for better buildings to build and the sizes. This box right here is a great step, and the special permit if need to go from 3 to 4. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, any more questions from anyone? All right,
No,
thank you very
Dale,
much, Chris. Oh, go ahead, Pete.
No, I just want to thank Chris for participating tonight, and I'm happy to work with Chris to obviously continue on with this this study that we embarked on together.
It's making progress. It's going in the right direction, I think. Thank you very much, Chris.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, so the next on our agenda is a review and approval of minutes from September 24th, 2020.
And it was pointed out to me that I did not attach those to the first email, but I did just email them out while we're in the meeting. Thank you, Lakshmi.
Does everybody have them?
So.
Does everybody have them?
Yes.
To review? I guess that's a yes from everybody.
This is very far down there, but on line 118, Ms. Kendall made a motion to approve the weathered wood shingles and champagne metal roofs. So just need to separate those two things.
That'd be roof shingle.
Roof shingles, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Everybody ready? Joe's found something.
Give me one sec. Which meeting was this? This was September 24. Is this the meeting where we had the letter from town council with regard to the easement?
Yes, that's what I have in my notes from Lisa, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see that. I don't
see any reference to it.
I don't see any reference to it. And okay, Mr. Matchik
read
okay,
the
I'm
email.
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Matchik read an email into record from Lisa Mead concerning the easement that indicated the easement concerning there is no agreed upon easement as of right now, so isn't concerning a potential easement. Is that the right way to say it?
A future easement. I think they got it in the paperwork that they get an easement. They just haven't decided where.
I mean, I
don't think it's potential. I think it's where it's going to be the final.
I don't think the I don't know. Is anybody else, Peter?
They wrote into the deal that they get an easement, and they just haven't decided where they're going to do what with it yet. But isn't it, Pete can probably answer that, isn't it part of the?
It's part of, right at this point, there is a potential easement, and from what Lisa's email was and everything that I know, that any and all easements or the use of that easement will have to come back in front of the planning board for that modification. And so I can expand on that tomorrow. I can expand on that note in the minutes, Joe, and then I can kind of come back. But I'll probably add that verbiage, what Lisa wrote in that email, and then we can kind of go from there.
I mean, I don't know that you have to put the whole body of the email into the minutes. I mean, usually the minutes cite, like usually there's a citation of documents. I don't see that on this. We were in the habit of doing that. Is that at the bottom here? No, I mean, I thought we were in the habit of defining the attachments or the documents that were referenced for the meeting.
Yes, I will add those.
Yeah,
so you do add those.
Yeah, so Peter, I mean, I don't think you need to put the body of the email in the minutes. I think as long as we add the documents to the bottom, okay. And that's, that's available. So, right? Okay. Do you guys disagree with me?
No, I can, we can do both, okay. Whatever. I think it's easy enough to add in the language, and obviously minutes live forever, right? In town, in municipal government. And so it may make sense just to put verbatim right into the minutes. That's what I would do, just as insurance, I would say. So we'll do both. Okay.
But I do think we should be identifying the reference documents in each of these minutes. And if I've been missing that in these last few, like we made that change, I think last year, we should try to stick with that. That was good.
Okay.
For posterity's purposes.
And Pete, I have a note here saying that council's guide mentions that this is not in the purview of the planning board. I might have it wrong too.
Correct. It's at this current point, it's not. When we
Okay.
talked about it, it was not in the purview of the planning board,
Okay.
and it wasn't part of the application process.
Anything else? No one's talking. Let Joe finish reading.
I think I'm good.
Okay, then do we have a motion to approve the minutes of September 24th, 2020 with the changes that we discussed?
So moved.
Second that.
All in favor, roll call, please.
Trisha Kendall, aye.
Lakshmi Krishnan, aye.
Deepa Venkat,
Joe Rubertone, aye.
Dale Buchanan, aye, and it passes 5-0-0. Okay, then administrative matters, anything you let us know about?
I'll just let everybody know that last night, Rich Gordon, the owner of 10 to 50 Main Street, presented for a second time in front of the selectmen last night, proposing a 40R development, which would redevelop the entire, I'm going to call it the mill across the street from the town hall. That entire parcel, which would include that go from, I would say, the river walk all the way down to where town hall starts. So that project is a fairly large project. It probably be one of the biggest investments the town has seen in a long time, especially in the downtown area. A 40R is a little bit of a, it's a new concept, I would say, to the state. There's been a few of them. Well, there's been a handful of 40Rs scattered around the state. A 40R district is a zoning tool that allows a project of this size and nature, which is close to public transportation to take place. Part of the 40R district, the town would actually receive a payment, a one-time payment from the state upon approval and construction of the development. And so it is a ongoing conversation, I would say, between the owner and the select board. I would say in the near future, the planning board, I think it makes sense for the owner of the development, Rich, and his team to come in and to talk to the planning board kind of on an informal, obviously it's informal at this point. It's not a public hearing, so there's no notification. However, I think it would make sense for him to come in and talk to the planning board and kind of get the board's overall, I would say, reviews of the project and maybe concerns and of the project before it moves too far forward. Mm-hmm. Because it's a zoning amendment, please note that a zoning change would have to go to town meeting, and it would have to receive a supermajority, a 2/3 vote at town meeting. And the planning board actually is the board that holds that public hearing, as the planning board holds all public hearings for zoning. So with that said, that project is there's a project being talked about at that address in front of the select board, and I would say that everyone, this board should be prepared to, listen to or meet with the owner and the owner's team, I would say, at an upcoming planning board meeting.
Okay.
One question, Peter. I certainly would welcome the opportunity to meet with the owner who's proposing to do this, redevelopment and learn about this. But I guess, is it, at the end of the day, this 40, because it's going through a 40R process, this really ultimately comes down to the decision of the select board, correct?
I would say the decision starts with the select board, Joe.
Right.
I would say not the decision. I would say the conversation start with the select board.
Right. So the project needs to get to a place where the select board feels comfortable that they would support this project going forward under a 40R, and that they would, you know, thereby sponsor it. But if they can't get comfortable or they don't like what's being proposed, then it doesn't necessarily move forward under 40R in front of the select board, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my only, you know, I'm certainly willing to have to be at our meeting and have these discussions, but would it not, and does it not make sense for a joint meeting of the planning board and the select board, you know, at these, like when does that happen, or is that appropriate? I mean, I don't,
you know, it in my eyes, I agree. Yes, Joe, that would probably be a good way to move forward. And I can bring that idea up to, you know, the town, you know, Mike Herbert and Jen Ball to see if that would be something that the select board would want to take on or participate in a joint.
It obviously complicates stuff a lot, right? Because like we have our meeting cadence, they have a different meeting cadence, we have other matters, so it puts us in a place where you're getting like Wednesday meetings with select board and Thursday meetings for the planning board. So I get the logistical complication of that, but
I think it's a lot easier from a logistical standpoint to meet on Zoom, to tell you the truth, Joe, because you know, they meet on Wednesday nights. If it's the first thing on their agenda at 7 o'clock, then the planning board could, you know, we could advertise a joint meeting, and the planning board could hop on the Zoom call. It'll be an extra meeting, obviously, I would say, for the planning board to meet on a Wednesday night. But I don't see any reasons why I could not work to try to set that up. So
yeah, I mean, please, what does the rest of the board think about this? Like, I'm just a loudmouth, but.
Are you thinking of that being a joint meeting because the final decision will be a joint decision, or was it because the two committees have a very different approach and destination for the same topic?
No, I mean, my desire for it is not because I think we're in different places, the select board versus the planning board. It's just more of, you know, the conversations the select board, again, I have not attended those select board meetings, and I do intend to watch them on tape. I have not been present at those select board meetings the 2 times this has been before the select board, but I mean, at the end of the day, what the select board's doing right now is the same thing that the planning board does when a project comes forward. When a developer says, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, and they come to the planning board before a project's submitted and they say, hey, what do you think of this? That's what they're doing with the select board now. And so, you know, my thinking in going towards this joint meeting is just that, like, you know, ultimately they're making the decision to whether or not to sponsor it, but it's just I just think it better connects. Like, we spend a lot of time doing this. It just connects the two boards, and ideally maybe we end up we just are more coordinated and in the same place.
Yeah, I think when I look at, and I have never personally worked on a 40B.
40R.
I'm sorry, I've worked on 40Bs. I've worked on, I've never worked on a 40R case, and so it's new to me. But I think what you're asking, Joe, is to work hand in hand with the selectmen on the development of the project, because the zoning as it's drafted entails the project that's almost kind of encompassed within those conversations or outlined within those conversations.
Yeah, because I mean the worst case scenario, and I'm not envisioning this at all, but at the end of the day, the select board reaches, shapes the project, gets to a place, says yes, we'll sponsor it. Boom. Now we got to do a zoning change. Here you go, planning board, do the zoning change. Take the zoning change before the people. And like if we're not at the meeting and we're not part of the conversation, it feels a little bit odd. Like it's kind of like, here you go, just go do this, right? And no, I'm not suggesting I'm not suggesting there's any issue with the process. It'll be fine. I just envisioning like that's what it looks like,
Yeah, no, the process is I would say a process of this nature is cumbersome, right? And so it's they've started with the select board, and that is the appropriate board to start with, right? They they talked about their idea, right? They collected some comments. They went back to say, hey, we made these changes. So yeah, I do believe maybe, you know, the next meeting or the meeting after, you know, it makes sense to have a joint meeting, or it's the project's at a place right now where it does make sense for them to say, okay, we met with the select board twice. Let's go to the planning board and let's talk about it, right? And let's, you know, let's not, you know, let's continue to kind of propose our development plan. And if it takes place at a joint meeting, great. If it takes place at a planning board meeting, it takes place at a planning board meeting with the planning board and not the select board. But I can work to see if the select board would be interested in having a joint meeting, or having the planning board join their meeting on their scheduled Wednesday nights, and then obviously we can kind of make that happen, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that, like, for a project of this size, that kind of smoothing that hard boundary between select board and planning board, so that we can kind of understand, you know, as they've seen the project a couple of times, maybe understand where they're at, what their thoughts are, and have our questions come in with them at the same time before it moves. So I think that might be a good transition to get all the major questions out on the table with everyone listening, and able to add in or to counter or to bring up another fact if you haven't thought about something. I think that would be a much better way to start than for us to kind of get it cold in a way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Or half baked already, and then we can't.
Yeah.
Not as moldable.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I can reach out to. I'll talk to. The selectman's office, and I can see if we can make that happen, and kind of go from there.
Awesome.
Thanks, Peter.
Mm-hmm. Other than that, there's nothing too much new. Just dealing with everyday stuff, and then really that's about it. There was a development that was proposed back in 2015. A storage facility over on Magunko Road. I reviewed the decision. They did pull some permits to trigger that site plan approval. And then with the downtown work, the town actually took actually leased the land before the development occurred to use it as a site for the water main project that was completed last summer. And so that developer wants to get going on that project. And so I'm still I'm reviewing that file, but I just kind of wanted to give the board the heads up that project from 2015, even though it's 5 years later, they did trigger the permit. The town, the developers and the owner of the land worked with the town regarding the ability of the town to lease that land back, I would say, for a municipal project, and he's just looking to get going on that project.
So what's the address of this, Peter?
I think it was 0 Magunko Road.
That's the one, the industrial building there they're going to put in, yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So we may have to do an extension on that or something.
They already pulled some they pulled permits, and they put in some infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And then I believe before I arrived, it was analyzed that the DPW could use that site as a good, I would say, site for, I would say, setting up and/or the storage of materials when the project was done for the water mains in the downtown.
Is this the gravel lot next to the train tracks?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we think about the Cherry Street decision, there was something as part of that was the town was looking at that parcel as being an additional municipal parking lot.
No, it's not that section.
On the other side.
On the other side of the track. It's on Magunko Road side.
Mm-hmm.
There's a train track between there. So what you're talking about is the little area that would be a parking spot right off of Cherry there. This one's on the other side of the track, the Magunko Road side.
The lot I'm thinking about is on the Magunko Road side.
Yeah, that's the property that we approved. I remember that for the industrial complex there.
Okay.
It looks like it's all the same part of a big parking area, but the one you're talking about that we were talking about for the brewery is actually on the brewery side of the track.
Got you. Okay.
So the one with the permit is between the tracks and Gunko Road.
Okay, I'll dig in. Thank you. Okay. Sorry.
All right. Well then.
And
just one other note if anyone has not isn't in the downtown area regularly, if you want to go by, and I sent to look at 128 Main and the dormers and the 2 roof colors which are now in place. I think it looks a lot better. I think I was so happy to see those changes go up, and it softens the building so much. So drive by there, take a look if you haven't yet. It's
as exciting as it is, it's sad that we have to get excited that it's almost what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, that's true.
Did they change the door yet, Trish?
I don't know if they've changed the door. I'm always looking up at the door.
I think I saw the front door, the side glasses in. I think it does.
I've not looked at it.
It's
more staring at the dormers.
Definitely night and day from what they had up there.
It is
definitely back to where it's much better. Thank God. All right, so now I'll entertain a motion to end this meeting at 9:28 if anybody would like to.
So moved.
Second that.
All in favor, roll call please.
Trisha Kendall, aye.
Lakshmi Krishnan, aye.
Good.
Joe Rubertone, aye.
Dale Buchanan, aye. It passes 5-0-0. And thank you everybody and good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
And
good night, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Thank
I
you.
like to do